And I'm excited to come back for our next episode of the Big Gay Overalls podcast. And you guys wanted it. And today I'm delivering the long-awaited return of my darling wife, Sharon, to the podcast. How are you, my love?
Woo! Where's all the applause on that other podcast? They get applause when they come on, and I just left hanging.
I think that usually happens in the editing. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, great. That'd be lovely.
Yeah, no problem. Tip for other podcasters, make sure your guests aren't high maintenance when you get them on.
How much am I getting paid for this thing anyway?
Like everything with me, it's a love job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you wanted to come on, so here you are. And I have to give the people what they want as well.
Thank
High
you.
demand. Yes.
Yeah.
So today we thought we'd dig into a topic that you're particularly interested in and you thought might be really relevant. And that is the issue of creating boundaries primarily and how we navigate that, particularly when it comes to family or, other relationships, like how we can navigate that, because that can be tricky. And that's something that I've struggled with. So you are our resident counsellor here at Big Gay Overalls. So the floor is yours, my love. Let's kick off.
Thank you. So we've had some chats with Elisa Kirkman about being estranged from family members. So both Lisa and I have had that experience. And I come across it in my work as well. So I thought it's probably something that people don't really talk about very much. And we're talking about it this week about culturally, I think, this generation, there's more of that happening. I think, we've talked about my extended family and how close they all are. And I don't think they necessarily had a choice back then. That was survival, and that's how people got through. But I think in this generation, there is more of a choice, and I think people are learning about boundaries more.
And I think people, in previous generations, it's like, well, family is blood and that's it. There's no other option. Whereas, rightly or wrongly, whatever situations arose, that's what they live by, that's what they stuck with. And it's true what you said, it's survival. But there's always that saying that I always come back to, when you don't know better, you do better. And we have more information and we're able to take more agency and ownership over ourselves about what is healthy for me. And, yes, blood is thicker than water, but, love is thicker than blood. Like, having people around you that are going to protect you, challenge you appropriately, like help you grow as a person rather than just, well, I've got to be around this person because, we came from the same family unit.
Yeah. And they're just old rules, right? So it's old rules that we've been taught, and often we don't question those, like the blood is thicker than water one. So we had an incident with that probably 12 months ago or so, where one of our relatives was separating and didn't want anyone to contact the ex. And Lisa and I talked about it, and okay, well, what do we think about that? And really, we thought that if someone was welcomed into the family, then they are family. And then separation doesn't necessarily mean that someone's no longer a part of the family. And unless they've done something challenging, then, we thought that it was okay to have a relationship with them and that it couldn't be dictated by anyone else, I suppose.
Yeah. And considering that, other people in the family had a long-term relationship with that person, as they'd formed a friendship, they'd always done the right things by them, and then all of a sudden you just cut them dead. It's like, that's and I know that does happen in a lot of situations where, there's divorce or there's separations, and then it's like, well, regardless of what you thought about that person, now I can't think that anymore, or I can think that, but I got to keep it quiet. And, I've just been through the process of rereading Gillian Abbey's book, Perfectly Queer, and she talks about, like, when she was separating from her husband, how worried she was. She was particularly close to his grandmother or great auntie. Can't remember what it was. And, she sent her an email or a letter and said, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. And she was fully accepting that she would never be able to, go and spend time with that person again. And the auntie or the relative wrote back and said, I love you. You're always welcome in my home.
Mm.
It's like, that's, an adult way to navigate these situations that can sometimes be tricky, but people just feel like at times you have to choose a side.
Yeah.
When that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to stop and reflect on why we're doing something and whether that's actually our belief or just something that's been passed down. Often when we stop and think about it, it's not actually what we believe anyway. It's like,
Yeah.
actually, you know,
And we talk about it a bit as in, what aligns with your values as being a good human, and are you acting in accordance with what your values are? Like, and like we often talk about when people are not living in alignment with what they know is a good way to live, that their soul knows. Like, they have to get up every morning
yeah,
and wash their face, and if they really look themselves in the mirror, they would have to feel some kind of way about that. And they know that they're not doing, what their, their inner values would determine that they would do. But they just don't take time to sit with that feeling. They just brush it off and move on and forget about it, push it to the side. So they never sit with it to actually feel the impact of living like that.
yeah. And I think from our perspective, we've worked hard on not judging that person. So
Mm,
being able to love people and let them go. So maybe they're not the right fit for you. They don't treat you with respect. They're not
mm,
healthy for you. Then when there's those sorts of things happening in relationship, then we really need to question, um,
mm,
do I want to maintain this relationship or is it better off letting it go? And
mm,
just because you're born to the same parents doesn't mean that one, that you're going to get along, and two, that you should put up with disrespectful or
mm.
harmful behavior.
And, if I look at the example, of me with my sisters, like, we are three very different human beings, made three sets of very different life choices throughout the entirety of our lives. And I choose not to have a relationship with one of them at all, because it might be fine for a little bit, but it always turns toxic. And, she knows my uh, weaknesses in my underbelly, and she can stick a knife in that real quick. And then
Mm,
the other one is just superficial, as if it's to do with, anything to do with my mother's health. Because I know that if from many, many, many hard lessons learned, if I open up my life to them, it ends in a shitstorm for me.
yeah,
And then they just walk away, and then, everyone else is to blame except them. So I made the decision many years ago now, like, it means I don't get to have a relationship with my niece or anything like that. But, you know, that wasn't worth the trade-off for having to deal with the toxicity that her, mother brings around, kind of thing.
yeah,
And at the time I did that, I didn't know enough to understand the concept of boundaries, but it was just like, I just know it's not good for me to be involved with you at all. And there's no middle ground in that. There are some relationships you have in life where you can create boundaries so you can still continue a relationship with them,
yeah,
and I've talked a bit on here about, working through stuff and being able to care for mum, is being able to set boundaries so I can operate and care for her and live alignment with my values. But it doesn't have to be a total disconnect either. But for those relationships, it has to be, there's no middle ground. There's no way. But it's still
yeah,
difficult because, you Hollywood and books and TV give you the version of, this is what your family should be, and families all stick together. But, you can't control other people's choices. All you can control is how you react or respond to it, and
yeah.
whether you let it affect your peace.
Absolutely. And we get sold this story that families should stick together, and have each other back, and it's meant that people have stayed in situations that have been harmful. And how can that be good? Really?
Yeah. And
Like, so
it's
you're
not.
gonna have someone, but they're gonna, be hurting you along the way, or they're gonna be abusive or whatever. That can't be right. So it's changing some of those old ideas and getting in touch with yourself and what's right for you. So when we talk about boundaries, there's all sorts of boundaries. There's physical, sexual, emotional, spiritual, financial, all these types of boundaries. And what boundaries are is the invisible barrier that separates me from you. So when we don't have boundaries, like an example would be a relative that keeps borrowing money and doesn't pay it back. And, I even had to have those sorts of boundaries with my mum around borrowing money. And I realized that helping her wasn't actually helping her. It just kept her in that constant state of being in debt. So, I had to have some challenging discussions with her, and she didn't like it at the time. But, probably 6-12 months later, she thanked me for that, because she was able to get out of that week to week. Through it was hard, but she got out of that, and she was able to have, a little bit of money in the bank and able to be free financially. And that started with setting a boundary. So when I was helping other people, it felt good to me, but it wasn't actually helping them.
And it was not helping you either, because you quite often then feel resentment or you feel stuck yourself that you're doing something that you really don't want to be doing, but you don't know how to not do it. And I think the main thing that I've learned when it comes to navigating boundaries, that it's actually the kindest thing you can do for them and you. And it's the best thing that you can do so that you can both be healthy humans. Like, you're not just doing it, no, I'm cutting you off because I want to be an asshole. It's what is best for everybody,
Yeah,
and
and look,
whether it's just on a level
sorry.
of something, or whether it's a complete cutting off or, restricting some things, it's the best thing it's the kindest thing I can do for you right now.
Yeah, and we've experienced that where a relative has cut us off as I don't know what you call it, a tit for tat revenge, like power play. And it's very different to consciously deciding that this is a boundary and this person isn't healthy for me.
Yeah, I think, they were doing it to be a brat, essentially,
So,
and to say,
yeah,
I can control this button, I'm going to click unfriend. And, that's one of the perils of social media as well, is like, sometimes, yes, the trash does take itself out, but people can use that. They'll unfriend you or they'll block you. And then all of a sudden, when they decide they want to, they can bring you back on. Or
yeah,
if they decide to even restrict what you see, but then they still have unfettered access to your stuff, it's very one-sided and gives them a position of feeling like they're more powerful than you and they know better than you. So it becomes a game rather than the conscious, I always think back to Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin when they split up, they had a conscious uncoupling.
yeah,
And, when you have that thoughtful process of like, I'm doing this for these reasons and this aligns with what I need to do for me right now, it's a very different thing to just going unfriend or block.
yeah.
That those things may be things that follow on from it, but when that's someone's first salvo, that gets really like icky.
Yeah. I've been estranged. It sounds like a strange word. Estranged from my sister for many years, and mum really struggled with it. So she was brought up differently, and it was very much about family sticks with family, and like you have to look after each other and all this sort of stuff. But it was a toxic relationship, and she couldn't help but have digs, sort of similar to your sister's bump. So it was really hard to start with. So initially it's not like, yeah, it's fantastic. Initially it's like, I'm conflicted between these ideas of what the ideal family is and what
Mm,
you'd sort of dreamed about,
mm,
and then the other side where it's, this is actually damaging to me and I deserve better than this.
And it's hard to give yourself that space to sit with that, because you've got the initial, like when something's not working, when there's not there's that misalignment, people you get confused,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, like you said, you've got the old stories and the old patterns. Like my mother still would die on the hill of like us three sisters getting along, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Mum, it's never going to happen. We are three incredibly different human beings. This is
Mm.
and quite often, like, I would be the one who would withdraw from the relationship with the other two. And I distinctly remember one Christmas we were going somewhere to do something. Oh, and what a surprise. The other sister was
Yeah.
there. And I'm like, for fuck's sake. Like, and I knew that Mum had organised it, but had not told me, because she knew that I wouldn't want to go. But this
Yeah.
is her reality and her dream. So
Which is
when you're
controlling and
yeah,
manipulating, but okay, keep going.
100%. Yeah. But when you're in that space, like, you tend, if you're like me, an eternal people pleaser, and you go, well, I want to try and keep everyone happy or whatever, then it can be very hard to go, well, no, I'm going to be the one to make the stand here. Because you get to a point where you're like, I've had it to here. I can't take any more.
Yeah.
It's not good for me. Like, my younger sister has been in and out of my life for many years. And then about 4 and a bit years ago,
Mhm.
she just was high or drunk and got on a bandwagon about something. And then she just sent me some of the vilest text messages I've ever seen that just destroyed me. And it was at that moment I went, never again will this happen. Never again. And they've had no tangible part of my life. Like, I don't see them, don't speak to them since then, even though she's like, I don't know why Lisa's not speaking to me.
Yeah.
Well, let me write you a novel. But it's still very hard to get it. Sometimes you've got to be pushed to that breaking point and then be okay with someone's going to view you as the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you experience like grief and loss with that?
No. Well, yes, but not for her. It was more about the relationship with my niece, which was tricky because she's the only like grandchild for my grandmother and that. And, I never had kids but even then the relationship with my niece was always at arm's length, and that's been Mum's greatest fear, is that my
Yeah.
younger sister will withdraw that at any point in time and use it as leverage. So it's really, that bit was hard, but then I realized that, I couldn't just keep getting flogged for that reason.
And she was quite abusive as well. It wasn't like it was just mild stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really toxic and
Yeah.
very, you know, hitting at all my weakest points that she knew so well. And that's what she's always done. And she's, a very nasty, spiteful person. And
Yeah.
hasn't done any work on any of her trauma or anything like that, just self-medicates, and it's always everybody else. And that everybody else is usually me. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
not anymore. Because by that point, I'd started doing a lot of work. So I started to understand, hang on a minute, this is not how things play out. And
Yeah.
and then I then had to take that boundary a step further and say to my mother, I don't want to hear about them. I don't want to know what
Mm.
they're doing. I don't want to know anything. She still persists in telling me things, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I keep reinforcing it, saying, I don't care. Like, I don't care, and
Yeah.
that's just the way that it's got to be. And I've got to constantly keep reinforcing that with her, because in
Yeah.
her mind, she can't understand why no one can get along. Even though she knows the things that have been said and done, she just dismisses that in her mind. And that's okay. So, yeah.
Are you
So,
happy with the decision?
yeah, I'm stoked with the decision. My life is a lot better. I don't always, we had the three of us had a group WhatsApp chat, and, it would be funny and stuff, but you're always waiting for it to not be that.
Yep.
And now it's just started to turn like that with my middle sister, who has, stopped responding for things to do with Mum and everything. So I'm like, cool. Well, I don't need to tell you anything anymore. That's
Yeah.
fine. And I have zero expectation.
One of the things that happens when we're in this sort of situation is we often seek external validation for our decisions.
Mm,
So we might talk to other people. So it's like we're trying to rally the troops and get people on our side.
yes.
When we're really clear about our decision, and that's one of the things that I work really hard on is not worrying about what other people think
Mm.
and just
You're very
being
good at
clear.
that.
Yeah, just being clear that this is what's right for me, so it doesn't matter what other people think.
Mm, mm.
So, but there's a real inclination to get people on my side if people understand. So that constant talking about it actually keeps you in that.
Mm. Yeah, and we've been through that in the last year with a few situations that have arisen. Like, we just felt like we're just talking about the same thing over and over. So we just made a conscious decision that, well, it's not changing. We're happy with where we're at. Let's just not talk about it now. And
Yeah,
it's not talking about it to avoid it, but we're like, well, we're not bringing anything new to the table every time we talk about it. It just keeps us stuck in that space. If anything
yeah,
changes, we'll revisit. But until then, let's just get on with our lives. And
yeah,
I remember yesterday sitting and talking. We're at a function, and I was saying to people that our life very much now is built around like what serves us and what brings us joy and what aligns with our values. And if something comes up, we're like, well, we should go to that, or
yeah,
we really want to, and what's it going to bring to us? Okay, let's go do that. And that's our basic decision making, rather than we don't do anything. Well, I still do things I feel like I should do, but we're working on that. But it's, 90% of the time though, it's like, well, what do we want to do? I was going to something the other week. You'd had a really big week. You're exhausted. You're like, no, I'm not going to go. I said, okay, that's cool. Like, there's
yeah,
no, well, you have to go. It's expected.
yeah,
It's like, nope, that's not what I need to do right now. And you're amazing at that. And I'm still getting better at it, but it's still that process of, and they're all those mini boundaries. So boundaries don't have to mean that you're cutting people out of your life or it's all a big dramatic thing. Sometimes it's like I'm setting up a boundary to protect my energy,
yeah,
that I'm not going to take work calls at a certain time. Like when I left my previous job, that was me creating a boundary with some help around what I was worth and what I would accept and wouldn't accept.
yeah,
And okay, well, now my calendar's set up in such a way I don't feel the pressure to, I have to be available at all times. It's like, no, if people want to get in my calendar, here are the times that's available.
yeah,
And I've set that up. And I had someone from America reach out, goes, oh, I can't really get in your calendar. I went, well, there's plenty of times there. I'm not doing stupid o'clock anymore. Sorry.
yeah,
And they're like, okay, cool. And like, my initial reaction was to go, oh, just let me have a look and see what I can do. But it was like, no, well, my availability is my availability, man.
yeah,
If we connect, we connect. If we don't, we don't. Like, and that person, it's not someone who wants to work with me. It's just someone that wants to catch up. And it's like, okay, well,
yeah.
if it means enough to you catch up, then you'll do that. So boundaries can be those little things around your time and your energy, not just have to be ending of relationship type boundaries.
Yeah. When I first started setting boundaries with my family, one of the first ones was identifying the amount of time that I could spend with them. So
Mm,
I'll, and I was doing some therapy and stuff at the time and starting to work on boundaries. And it was like, okay, well, how many days can I visit before problems start? So it
mm,
ended up being like 3 days. And people were really like, what? You're going after 3 days? Like people just couldn't understand it and
mm,
sort of tried to kick back a bit with that stuff. But it was about understanding for me what actually works for me, not
mm,
not what's the expectation, what works. And
mm,
when I was able to put that in place, the relationships were better.
mm,
So once I got to the fourth day, I was getting tired and over people and I needed some space. So then there would be arguments and then it wouldn't end well. So if I listened to that and went for the 3 days, then
mm,
I could go and everything was good.
mm,
So it was just like, oh, okay. Well, it actually helps the relationship putting those boundaries in place, as
Mm,
well as stopping doing things that I was feeling resentful for, when I felt used, when I didn't actually want to.
mm.
So those sorts of things help the relationship
And it's
more
really quick.
than hindering it.
And it's really quick for those resentments. They just build up really quickly, and it leads to a bit of a shitstorm. I always
Yeah.
remember something which has stood me in good stead in life in general. In when I did my CrossFit Kids training course, and they talked about the games that you would play with the kids, and they said always stop before they're ready. So then if you let the game go on so long that they get bored with it, next time you say, "Oh, let's play Duck Duck Goose," they'll be like, "Oh, fuck, not that again. That's boring." Whereas they're like, "Yeah, that was really fun last time." They might be disappointed when you finish it early, but it's a bit like that. Understanding your time is like, I'm going to leave early before so everyone still has a good feeling when I leave. Like, "Oh, we're sorry
Yeah.
you're going," rather than, "Oh, thank God she's in that car."
Yeah.
Like, and it's leave them wanting more. And again, for you, then you've left at that time that's good for you. You feel good on your trip home. Next time something comes up about going to visit, you're not like, "Oh, well, last time I left it was weird. Now it's going to be
Yeah.
weirder." You know it's going to be okay because it was left on that good note. But it takes a lot of that self-awareness. Like you said, you were working through that in therapy, and
Mm.
clearly as a counselor, you're a big exponent of that, but also from your own work you've done and the work I've done, like we're big on the power of that is once you have that self-awareness, even if they don't, you can do things that protects both sides.
Yeah.
If that relationship is something that you want to protect and value, well, someone needs to be the grown up here and put a stop in. So it's going to have to be me. And that's okay because I've done the work and I understand it. And like you might not understand it because you haven't done any work and you may never do any work, but this is a good thing for both of us right now. And you don't even need to communicate why you're doing it or anything like that. You just have to know within yourself that this is a good thing right now.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things is loving someone and letting them go.
Mm,
So it's much easier when we feel like we hate them. That's easy.
mm,
But if you love someone, but they're not healthy for you,
mm,
then that's really hard.
mm. And it can be hard, like letting go in general, like whether it be your identity, your life that you've built, what you should be doing, who you should be, like all that letting go is really hard to do.
Mm,
And we can struggle with that as humans because, we're like, the unknown is scarier than the known, even though the known might not be serving us.
yeah.
So, how does to throw a question at you without notice, like if if someone's like if you're sitting in a situation, if it's not serving you, whether it be a relationship, whether it be work, whether it be anything, be a business you're in, whatever, it's not serving you. How does someone start that path of identifying even a small boundary that they can start with and start building confidence with it as a skill?
Yeah. I think it always starts with awareness. So if you don't know what's happening, then you can't change it.
Mm,
So paying attention to what happens. So for me, I like to pay attention to what's happening in my body. So if I'm getting body sensation, my body's trying to tell me that I'm not comfortable, that I don't like it, that I'm resentful, this isn't right, I don't want to be here. So paying attention to that
mm,
and then deciding, what's one small change that I could make? What's one
mm,
boundary I'd like to put in place?
mm,
And you've mentioned some good ones there around the should. So as soon as we're saying should, then we need to stop and go, hang on, that's
mm,
expectations. What do
mm,
I actually want? What do I want my life to look like?
mm.
And, making small steps. So
And it's
one of the things I often say is choose you.
mm. And it's about taking that time to actually tune in to what you're saying
Yeah.
and go, this is causing me to feel like I use the word ick, but
Yeah.
it gives me an ick. It makes me feel a certain way. And instead of just continuing on in a mad rush, like just taking that pause and having the control to have that pause to go, hang on a minute, every time I'm about to go see this person, this is what happens.
Yeah.
Or if I've got to make this sort of phone call or do this kind of thing, this is what happens, So maybe I should pay attention to that feeling and then do something different.
Yeah.
We get so scared, though, of being the bad guy. How do we navigate that? That's a big one, I think, for a lot of people is, when I talk, and I've talked about it endlessly on here, like my journey of coming out, the thing that stopped me for so long is like, I don't want to turn everyone's life upside down. I don't want everyone to hate me. And that's a very common theme that I see in people's Facebook posts and comments and things that are sent to me. So how do we get past that feeling that is really that's stopping us doing what's best for us because we want to be everyone to be okay?
And that's really stories we tell ourselves, scary stories. So we play the what if game and we play the what ifs in the negative. We don't think about the positives of all the amazing, wonderful things that could happen. So, as soon as we're getting into the what ifs, it's going to be problematic and it's going to lead to stress and worry. So, simple stuff like present moment awareness, staying in the present. Right now, this is what's happening. Right now, this is what I can do. So it's sort of like you said, sometimes the kindest thing that you can do is to set people free and tell them the truth. So, you can't control how other people think, feel, experience life. You can't control it. So, what we've got to do is be true to ourselves and stand strong in that. How other people take that is up to them, but we can't control it. So even if you did everything perfectly, people can still judge you and make you out to be the bad guy. So once you really understand that often people's reactions are more about themselves than you, then it gives you some freedom to just be yourself.
And it's that whole thing, I used to have this on a fridge magnet, what anyone else thinks of you is none of your business. And, I've had people when I said, I've just put this book out or this podcast or whatever, they're like, well, it's none of your business what happens to it now, because all you can do is control the message and the intention behind the message. I can't control the filters that other people put it through when they receive it. I can't, help them receive it in the way that I intended if that's not their experience or not their beliefs or even what they're prepared to be open to. And, it's all well and good to say that, but it's also, you need to, for a long time, consciously remind yourself of it. Like, like every time I put something out into the world, and probably why I'm on a bit of a creative bent at the moment, putting so much stuff out, because I'm putting it out so that if I stop and think about it, I'll get stuck in that space of, oh, what if nobody likes it? What if people think I'm a wanker or, whatever for putting that out there? Whereas once it's out there, I go, well, that's done now. It doesn't matter what I think about it or what happens to it. Here was I being authentic in the message I was putting out and the intention for putting it out? Yes. If I was putting something out to be inflammatory and be an asshole and that's the response I got, well, that's what you were looking for. Versus did I have, did the intentions align with my values and my message and what I want to do? What was my purpose for putting it out there? And if all of those things tick my boxes, then I just got to let go.
Yeah.
But I still have to remind myself.
Yeah, absolutely. My perspective is that your motivation is the main thing. So, and you say to me all the time that I get away with saying so much stuff. And it's because my motivations are good. So I'm only saying something to someone coming from a loving and caring place trying to help you. Like, I'm not attached to any results. I'm not attached to you doing any particular thing. But I would be doing you a disservice not to tell you. So there's no attachment to it. And people are able to receive that. And if they don't receive it, then maybe I'm planting a seed, maybe I'm wrong. That's okay too.
Yeah.
It's happened once.
I didn't think you were ever wrong, fella. I'm going to keep that clip. I'm going to cut it. That's going to make our reels. I'm just going to keep it on my phone, and when I need
Yeah.
it, I'll just play it. Thank you for that little gold mine.
Yeah.
But you do, and I admire that about you, that you're at the point in your life with all the work that you've done and all the things, you can have truly that zero fucks given attitude in that, yep, well, if you don't like me, that's okay. I don't need you to like me. And I'm not saying that you're some sort of cold, heartless being that doesn't
Mm.
feel, because I know that you feel deeply and things do hurt.
Yeah.
But when it's, to do with things that are, about protecting your space, and protecting us and our space now, like there's no compromise. There's no negotiating on that. Like, this is what has to happen. And even, when I was going through that situation and I was really struggling with letting go, you know, you and I had some hard, challenging conversations when you're like, this is not good for us. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's not working for us. And that's where I draw the line. As soon as something negatively impacts us, like both of us are very good at going, well, that's not negotiable. That's not happening.
Yeah.
And let's correct that imbalance. So, yeah, go on. You're about to say?
Yeah. Well, I think we can, if we are too caught up in what other people think, we start living lives that they want, not what we
Mm,
want. And then
mm,
eventually we're like, hang on, this isn't the life I wanted.
mm.
So, we
Which
don't want that. We want to live our life.
I think a lot of people who are in the coming out late in life have realized that, and I know that was certainly my journey, is like I spent my whole life ticking all the boxes I should to lead a good life and a
Mm.
responsible life. It's like, that isn't even a life of my choosing.
Yeah.
And I had a random reflection the other day at school. Like, when you get to about grade 9 or 10, you can choose your own subjects. Mum said, you can do
Mm.
what you want, but you must do typing and bookkeeping. I was like, and then when you do 11 and 12, had to do accounting. And I was like, but I'm never going to be a typist. Like, I'm not, but that was, no, that's not an option. That's what you're doing. That's what, and those classes were full mainly of girls,
Mm.
and
Of
the
course.
boys were down doing metalwork and woodwork. And, this was the career path. You'd be happy doing this sort of job. I'm like, man, but I don't want to do that job. Maybe I want to do this.
Mm.
But then when you get to the point when you start to own your identity and you're like, wow, for 46 and a half years, I was doing what I thought everyone else thought was a good life.
Mm.
And for the last, 3.5 years, I've had the most exceptional life. And it's a bloody good life. And I'm doing the things that make me happy. And I can, let go of some of those old beliefs, even like, when I say, oh, yeah, I had a nap today, or I was doing this, oh, good life you've got. Yeah, actually, it is a good life. Like, you know, you've even worked hard with me on changing my belief about you don't have to work 24 hours a day.
Mm.
You don't, if you sit and do something creative, that's just as powerful. Like, it doesn't always have to be about earning your place and being valuable and needing that. So I think a lot of us on that late in life journey get to that point where we're like, we've been living lives that are not even ours, which goes beyond our orientation or
Yeah.
identity or anything like that. But that's just one more piece of the puzzle, I think. Yep.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So before we stick a pin in this one, my love, given your experience and your infinite wisdom, and everybody loves to hear from you, what is something that someone who's listening to this, and maybe they've not come out yet,
Mm.
or they're thinking about it, or they're trying to navigate some of those family relationships or even relationships with friends that maybe have not, or deciding who they tell or when they tell, or
Mm.
responses are not ideal. How's the best way that they can frame their own thoughts to create that little circle of safety for themselves?
I think the when you wake up in the morning is a very powerful time. So you're very open to impressions. So being really careful about how you start that day
Mhm.
and just checking in with yourself. So start off the day checking in with yourself and asking, what do I need to do today? How do I need to take care of myself? What's right for me? And then continuing to check in throughout the day, just slowing things down instead of often when we react, it's really quick, quick, quick. So we want to slow things down so we can make conscious choices instead of just operating automatically.
Yeah. Perfect. Such
Beautiful.
wise words. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, my love. I know it won't be the last. Your episodes are always my most popular, so that's cool. But for those who are listening, please, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Give us a follow on the socials. Big Gay Overalls podcast on all the socials. Feel free to check out my second podcast, Microdosing Growth Podcast, where I give some personal development concepts with a short, actionable step you can do. 5-minute episodes. You can listen to it while you're brushing your teeth and use that morning time for some good. But primarily, thank you for following along with my journey here on Big Gay Overalls. And thank you once again, my love.
My pleasure. Take care.